I want to take a pause before I share this interview with Lindsay Lockett and let you know that we talk about suicide in this episode. In particular, we share our stories around suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. And welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. Today, I've got my friend Lindsay Lockett on the show, and I don't even know how many podcast episodes you and I have done together between my show and your show, but if you love her like I do, please go back and listen to the archives, and you can also listen to some of the conversations that I've had on your podcast. So welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thanks, Kat. It's good to be back.
So I always want to start out with like a little bit of a how I know you, why I love you, and then like give you a little bit of space so that you get to share with folks what it is that you do and how you embody that work. So Lindsay is like the person that I now refer all of my clients to who need support with trauma. Because I've shifted fully over into business coaching. And so every once in a while, I get folks in my inboxes in my life who are like, I don't have a business, but I need to work on trauma. And Lindsay is the one and only name I send them now. So, yeah, I feel like
You're
she's,
making me
oh,
cry.
are you crying about this?
Yes.
Oh, I love you so much. She's all verklempt. I think that you embody your work so beautifully, and it's in a really integrated way, and it's coming from a place where you have done your own work, and that's why you have the capacity and the container to hold people in the way that you do. And so yeah, you're it.
Thank you.
You're
that
my
means
gal.
so much to me. Oh my gosh, you have no idea. I mean, we're both human design projectors, and so like for someone to like witness me in that way, it just feeds my little projector soul. So thank you so much.
I'm actually a manifesting generator, but
No, you're not. I thought you were a projector.
No.
You have such projector energy. I was convinced you were a projector. That's so funny. Well, for my little projector soul, I feel really seen, and that means so much. So thank you.
Yeah, and I love your little projector heart. So now that I've, shared why I love you, what is the work that you do? And can you give a little bit of like a why it is that you do this before we get into our conversation?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the why before I tell you the what. So the why is that I have a very long trauma story, very long and complex trauma story, and found myself in a place about 4 years ago where my life was literally falling apart and my marriage was falling apart. I thought I was going to have to sell my house. I just felt so lost, and it was a very raw time in my life, and I was trying to navigate it from a totally cognitive place, and like that was creating more anxiety in my body, and I was dealing with debilitating anxiety, debilitating panic attacks, and debilitating insomnia. Mm-hmm. And on top of all of that, I was having like pelvic issues, pelvic pain, mysterious pelvic things that took me some time to figure out what it was. And then I had to get it fixed because it wasn't something that I could fix with like my diet or supplements or something. I actually needed to have a small surgery. It was just a lot. And I attempted suicide on March 7th, 2019. And I like to tell people that I attempted suicide because, one, it's not triggering for me to talk about. Like, it's just not a trigger for me. It's not hard for me to talk about. I understand if it is triggering for some people, but it's not for me. And I also I like to share that I attempted suicide, but I also like to throw in the caveat that just because I attempted suicide doesn't mean that like my comeback or my healing is any bigger or better than anyone else's. And I think sometimes we're like, oh my God, you attempted suicide and look where you are now. That's amazing. Like, it is amazing, but it's also amazing when people who haven't gone to that brink also heal. And so I don't feel like attempting suicide makes me any more qualified to do what I do. It's just amazing the things that we do whenever our nervous systems are so dysregulated that we feel like there's no coming back from that dysregulation. And, you know, for me, suicide was the most merciful thing I could do for myself at that time that I could think of. Like, it was an act of mercy. It wasn't because I had a bad life or because I didn't have a support system. It was just because I didn't see a way out of what I was in. And, so my suicide attempt failed because my husband caught me. I was actually walking outside in the snow. My plan was to freeze to death. And I live in Minnesota where it's extremely cold. And so you can do that in the wintertime. So my husband actually caught me as I was like walking through the snow to go get lost in the woods. And a couple days later, I checked myself into inpatient mental health care. I spent 5 days in the hospital. I knew that I was going in for psych meds and I wasn't coming out without them. So I voluntarily checked myself in. I voluntarily decided when I was ready to leave. And then after that, I had like the medication provided this like faux calm. Like, I know that medication doesn't heal, but I'm grateful that I had it because it gave me this like faux calm. And that's when I was like, okay, I've got to figure out what got me to this place. Like, I've got to figure out what brought me to the brink of literally ending my own life because I was so desperate and miserable and anxious and tired and all of that. And so I essentially took like a year and I started putting myself back together. And the putting myself back together sounds like, oh, that's so heroic and great. She put herself back together. But I'll cry saying this. I had to fall apart more before I could put myself back together. And then, I slowly started learning about my nervous system, started learning how to regulate my nervous system, had a spiritual awakening, realized that my nervous system is like a conduit or an antenna for my highest self. And I didn't have that connection established. And so establishing that connection to my highest self and living in awareness of my ego and my limiting beliefs and my thoughts and the catastrophizing that I did and the fight flight energy that was in my nervous system, like learning how to observe it rather than reacting to it all the time. And then as I started to do that, I've always been a very transparent, open person. I'm an open book. And I decided to start sharing how I was healing on Instagram. And so in June of 2020, I started the Instagram that I have now. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was a food blogger before. So I was like, I've never had a personal Instagram before. And that's what it started out as. Now it's a business Instagram. But back then it was very personal and I didn't care who followed. I just wanted a place to kind of chronicle what I was learning and how I was healing. And, because I am a human design projector, I didn't know this at the time, but my strategy is to wait for people to invite me in so that I can give them like my wisdom and my perspective and my experience. And that started happening organically. And so that took me from using Instagram as like a personal journey chronicling platform to using it as a business platform. And I've never advertised for coaching. I just had people like showing up in my DMs being like, do you do coaching? Will you coach me? And so I started coaching. I was doing health coaching before, but like I didn't even know there was such a thing as trauma coaching or nervous system coaching, but I've just sort of like found my way into it. And now this is also going to make me cry. So I started this business officially as a business like 18 months ago. And we're on track to hit 6 figures this year. And so it's just like the universe gave me everything that I needed to do it. And I just had to step into it and do it. And it was scary. But when you've been through all the shit that I've been through, starting a business is not as scary as everything else was. And so it felt like I can do this. Last summer, my husband came home and we now work together full time. And we have 2 separate workspaces, though. That's how we keep our marriage happy. But he does all of the like customer support. He runs our email platform. He does all of my website. He custom codes everything for me because I am the most high maintenance business owner you've ever met. He does all of that. And then I do, of course, like the podcast, the coaching. I develop the group programs and my workshops and stuff like that. So that's the what and the why and the how, I think.
I love it. Oh, I don't think I've ever heard the complete story all in like one go. You know, like I think I've pieced together the story from, you know, listening to you on different podcasts and your Instagram page, and you know, like I've gotten it in piecemeal spaces, but it's so lovely to be able to hear the full story, like just in one big beautiful breath. And I really appreciate you sharing that story, and I think the unspoken pieces of that story are how much work you've had to do to get to a place where you are a safe container, not just for yourself, but for other people. And I too have had suicide attempts, and you know, the interesting thing is, like, I feel like with every person who has been down in those depths, it represents something different. If you can get out of it. And for me, it was like, and I'm saying this because I'm curious about what it was for you. But for me, it was like, I knew that there were parts of me that needed to die. Like, there were parts that were no longer serving me. And those are the pieces that need to die. And just in our Western culture, we have no language for what that is. There's no language around, oh, you know, this perfectionist part of you that's actually served you very well in your life. You know, she's creating a lot of pain, and she's in a lot of pain. And so maybe that's the part of you that needs to die. It's not the whole of you that needs to die. And what I've found over time is, at first it was this crude idea of what death was, meaning I need to take my own life. And over time, it's become this nuanced conversation where I hold funerals for these different parts of me that no longer serve. And, you know, I think that it becomes easier and easier, only because my life no longer needs to like be upended and like completely flipped upside down. But, you know, the energetics around holding a funeral for a part of yourself is still like fucking hard to do. And, you know, this last month I went through another cycle, another round of it. And, you know, I think that when people look at folks who are doing this work on social media, it's easy to think, oh, Lindsay is healed, or Kat is healed, and so therefore, you know, she no longer has to have these hard days. And it's like, no, like there are still days where I am brought to my knees, and I'm so grateful that I'm brought to my knees, because it brings another layer of me that needed to be shed down. And to me, that is what my spiritual practice is I think that I spent the first half of my life thinking spirituality is about, let me go out there and find a teacher, let me go out there and find some sort of learning. It was always this like external space coming within. And for me, it's shifted what spirituality is, because I think of spirituality as being a subtractive process now, of like what's coming to the surface, what is being triggered, what is being activated in a way that it needs to be looked at, and what needs to be let go. And, how can we clarify and clarify and clarify that process over time? And I've had thousands of funerals of versions of myself. I'm sure I'm going to have thousands more before I actually, am laid to rest. But I appreciate when I get to have conversations about hard things like suicide and not have it hold the heaviness that it can hold, and this almost like we can't talk about it because X, Y, and Z reasons. So just wanting to say that I appreciate that you went there just right off the bat.
Yeah, I'll go there right off the bat. I think at the time, now I understand that there are parts of me that need to die, and it's not the whole of me, but then I did not have that awareness or understanding.
Same.
And so because that anxious part was so big and so scary and felt like it was never going to end, I couldn't like be like, oh, that's just a part of me. Like, it just felt like it was all of me, and this is all there ever will be, and I can never be any different, and I'll never have my life back. And so the most loving, merciful thing I can do for myself is to just end it. And I did a live on my Instagram probably over a year ago. It was on World Suicide Prevention Day, and like everything on social media that day was about preventing suicide and being supportive for people who are in that place, and interventions and crisis hotlines and all of that. And I'm the only person on the internet that I know of, and I got on the internet on World Suicide Prevention Day, and I basically said, I think suicide prevention is bullshit, because I was not going to be deterred from killing myself. And it wasn't because I didn't have support. I did. It wasn't because I wasn't surrounded by lovely, wonderful people who cared about me a lot. I was. It wasn't because I didn't have the financial resources to help myself. I did. Like, it had nothing to do with all the things that we usually think are associated with people wanting to end their lives. For me, I was less afraid of death and more afraid of continuing to live my life in that anxious, insomniac, panicking place. And so hot take number one, I think suicide prevention is bullshit. There you go.
Yep, you heard it here.
I mean, yes, like, support people, surround people, love people, but like, what are you going to do? You can't babysit an adult 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you just can't.
Yeah. And I think that this is where it turns into a conversation about like, what does support people? And like, part of my story is that my brother was suicidal when he was in high school. So I was 16, 17 years old when he attempted multiple times. And I guess I should just frame this. This is my own story of like what happened in that moment in our lives. Is my nervous system decided, in order to save my brother's life, I am going to just be on him 100% of the time. I would sit outside of the door when he would take a shower, and if he took too long taking a shower, I would knock on the door. I would sleep on the floor of his bedroom. And that was when my anxious attachment style, I think, I'm sure it was sort of present before, but that's where it got really activated, because to me, it was like, in order for me to survive, I need to have my brother with me. And in order for him to survive, I need to control him. And a lot of my own suicide attempts later on in my 20s, if I can sort of like zoom it out and like look at it from a broad perspective, is like, those are the parts of me that needed to die. The parts of me that were like controlling and anxious and needing to make sure that other people are doing exactly what I think that they're doing, and they're doing things in a predictable way. Like, those are the parts of me that were no longer serving. And and so to me, this conversation always goes back to nervous system, is like understanding and educating yourself about what it is that your body is doing, because we have a tendency to think, oh my gosh, depression and anxiety is this mental thing. It's this like emotional thing. And we forget that our bodies also went through those threatening experiences and are giving us information to do the thing that worked before. Because I can 100% say with certainty that I did save my brother's life. And, you know, he's fantastic now. He's got a wonderful life in Korea, and he's, you know, he's doing really well. But I know that had I not been anxiously attached to him, he would have died. And so to tell my body, no, you can no longer be anxiously attached, is a really, really threatening thing, and a really like a really hard thing to let go of. And so that was where like I felt like, same as you, I can't see a way out of this. I don't know who I am. I don't know how to, you know, it was way easier for me to think about dying than it was to think about living in that space too, because it was like, well, then who the fuck am I if I am not, you know, the savior and rescuer of all the people? And this is where I think that your work is so, so critical, because you bring it down to things that we can all relate to, which is we all have a body. Our bodies are more or less programmed in similar ways. And so, like, can we look at our bodies as partners in this journey instead of looking at it as like something that's working against you? And absolutely. I'm kind of curious, like what your take is on bridging the two, the mind and the body.
I mean, my take is that the body is everything. That's my take. Like, yes, we know there is a place for our logical, reasoning, analytical minds, for sure. But as you beautifully stated, people think that anxiety and depression are mental things, and they're not. They live in your body. They don't live in your mind. Now, is your mind thinking thoughts in response to what you're feeling? Yes. Like, that is true. So if you have, you know, like for me, the feeling of anxiety it's like a knot in my throat, kind of goes down, and I feel like heart palpitations, heart flutters, and then it ends at my solar plexus, and it feels like this hot, nauseating ball. Like that's what anxiety feels like for me. And I'm sure you've come across this too, Kat, in your work. Just being able to describe, this is what anxiety feels like for me, is huge.
100%.
Like, people do not understand that being able to feel what is present in the body and give it language, not to fix it, not to make it go away, not to diagnose it, but just to simply say, this is what's happening in my body right now, and this is what it feels like. That's huge. And that is where I start with every single one of my clients and students, is like, we have to learn to listen to the body. And to do that, we have to feel. The language of our body is feeling and sensation. And when we are disconnected and walking around in our heads all the time, then we think anxiety is a mental illness. We think depression is a mental illness. But actually, the mental part is all the stories that you're telling yourself about the sensation that's happening in your body, whether you're aware of that sensation or not consciously. Most people are not consciously aware. They have the feelings, but they're so absorbed in the story about the feelings, and that's what they think mental illness is. It's not. And so being able to be like, okay, I can be present with whatever is happening in my body right now, even if it's really uncomfortable, because as long as you're present with it, then you're not unconsciously reacting to it.
Yeah.
And the unconscious reaction is like our parents' unconscious reactions on us is where childhood trauma comes from. Our teachers' unconscious reactions on us is where childhood trauma comes from. And so whenever we have those same unconscious reactions to whatever's going on in our bodies, then we're inflicting hurt and harm on others. And this is how like the trauma cycle gets perpetuated. And so I talk about nervous system all the time in my work, but I cannot talk about it without also talking about awareness and consciousness, because the two go hand in hand and you cannot have one without the other. And it's not just about feeling the feelings of your body, but it's also about feeling and then noticing, how would I have normally reacted to this? And how do I want to choose to respond consciously instead? Because that conscious choice is how we shift the patterns. That's how we break the cycles. That's how we heal ancestral trauma. It starts with the awareness and the consciousness, and then being present with the sensations of the body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that, you know, I too start with the question of, you know, identifying an emotion. Where does that live in your body? And how does it feel? And even though I say it explicitly in those terms, where does it live in your body? How does it feel? 8 out of 10 times, somebody goes straight to their head and they go, I feel really confused. I feel really angry. And they start telling me about the emotional feelings that they're having, which is not to invalidate what that experience is. But like you're saying, it goes back to the body. And oftentimes it is one of the first breakthroughs that I experience with people is when they can actually start feeling those physical sensations in their body without creating a gigantic story about it. You know, as soon as you start being like, oh, body, you're feeling that tingling feeling in the back of your head again, that must mean that you're angry. How do we want to respond to this anger instead of how do we want to react to it? And I think that that's exactly what you're saying there. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people who I work with, like one of their number one complaints is gut issues, right? Like they've got some kind of a gut issue, some kind of dysbiosis, IBS, SIBO, like something like that, food intolerances. And same thing happens is like they have this sensation in their belly that's uncomfortable, and they may have absolutely nothing wrong with their gut. But the story they're telling themselves in their head is, I wouldn't have this sensation if something wasn't wrong with my gut. So something must be wrong. So that means we're now pathologizing the sensation.
Yeah.
So the sensation then becomes a symptom, right? And I'm not saying that people don't experience symptoms. I'm not saying that people don't get upset tummies after they eat. I'm not saying that people don't have IBS and things like that. I'm not saying those things don't exist. What I'm saying is that before it was something diagnosable like IBS or SIBO or whatever, food intolerances, before it was that, it was a sensation.
Yeah.
And it may have lived as a sensation for years without you connecting the dots that the sensation that your body is feeling is in response to some kind of stimuli, whether it's external or internal. Your body is responding with this sensation. And if you are living in your head all the time, then having this sensation in your belly, the story that you tell yourself about that is, oh, I have digestive problems.
Right.
I have stomach aches all the time.
And I need to go find something external to fix it.
Exactly. I need to fast. I need to do a bone broth cleanse. I need to go see a GI doctor. I need to go visit the naturopath and get some supplements. I need to start taking probiotics. And that's where people get on what I call the hamster wheel of wellness. And one of the things that I love helping people do is get off that hamster wheel. And getting off that hamster wheel starts with feeling what's happening in your body and not pathologizing it. And not making it mean that there's something terribly wrong with you. Yeah. And this takes practice. Like it takes so much practice. And I love how you shared that you say like, okay, what is it that you're feeling and where is it living in your body? That's so amazing. Maybe you've experienced this too, is I don't even start with what are you feeling? And where does it live? I start with like neutral time. Let's just go inward, almost like we're going on like, if you remember the show, The Magic School Bus with Miss Frizzle, you remember that show? It's like, if we're going to go in a school bus with Miss Frizzle and we're going to go through our body, like, let's just go drive around and see what's there.
Yeah.
And you might be really surprised at what you find. Like, you might find that there's nothing going on that's wrong, air quotes, right? Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, that sensation in your belly might not be anxiety. It might be that you're hungry, but you're not listening to your body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah. And, you know, this is something that I used to say a lot back when I was doing trauma work with people before I started doing business coaching is your body is the storyteller of your life. And so the sensations, the signs, the symptoms are really just communication from your body, and your body is going to speak louder and louder and louder until you start listening. Yep. And so, like, it speaks to what you were saying is before it turned into a diagnosable sign or a symptom, like, it was a sensation. And so if we can start listening to our bodies at the sensation level and start course correcting and start honoring our boundaries, start honoring our voice, start honoring, you know, these things that need to be said, then how does your body express itself then? It starts quieting down, right?
It does.
And so I think originally, like before we got into this conversation about bodies and anxiety and depression, when I asked you on the show, we wanted to talk about reciprocity.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm still up for.
Yeah. So I'm going to just like switch the little cog in the wheel a little bit, because I very selfishly just want to get your hot take on reciprocity because I just love your brain. But I think that this is one of the places that our bodies are trying to communicate with us. Because if you think about reciprocity, it's like I'm not receiving in a way that feels nourishing to me. I am overgiving. My boundaries are being overextended. I feel like someone's taking advantage of me. I feel like I might be taking advantage of somebody else. And so, like, this conversation around reciprocity, I love that actually we started with the body, because it's a really grounded place to start. Is what is the sensation in your body when your boundaries are violated, when you are being taken advantage of, when you are taking advantage of somebody else. And I think that that's, you know, that's the intersection of our work is always, we can just nerd out about the body for the end of time,
forever,
I think.
Yeah. For me, the body does speak. And I think that, when it comes to reciprocity, I think the way that it feels in my body anyway, whenever I'm in a relationship that doesn't feel reciprocal, it feels, the sensation is like a sensation that's difficult for me to name, because it feels like a sensation of something is missing. Like it feels like, I don't know what the feeling is, but something's missing, you know, like that's sort of the feeling. And it's not like a hole in my stomach. It's not like it's more of a visceral, like it's kind of on the outside of my body, on my skin I don't know, maybe. What is it like for you? What is the sensation in your body whenever you know you're not in a reciprocal relationship?
I'm feeling into it right now as you're speaking, because I'm like, oh, what does that feel like in my own body? I'm kind of proud to say that it's been a while since I felt like I've not been in a reciprocal relationship. And so I kind of have to go back into my mental catalog. And I remember early on posting on social media, actually, and not having the best boundaries around social media and feeling very exposed because I was sharing things that I hadn't done the work enough to see that it wasn't ready to be shared. And it felt like a hollowness in my chest.
Yeah.
Where like an animal was feasting on me. Like it was almost this literal sensation of like I am being eaten. And you know, the work that I've done around social media now is I am very authentic and very vulnerable about the things that I share, but I also do not share things that I am currently in dysregulation about. Because when I show up in dysregulation around social media, particularly because I'm in a position where people are coming to me for support, you know, but the service that I provide is love and compassion and support. If I show up in dysregulation, then I'm looking to my community to give me something that is not the appropriate kind of relationship that I want to foster.
Yeah.
You know, which is not to say I don't ask for support. I've got like my inner circle and I love the humans that I do, you know, my friends, my family, who I do invite to help hold me when I'm in dysregulation. But if I show up in dysregulation to my social media community, then I want something from them. And I don't ever want to show up in a space where I want something from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because you can't, I don't think we can have really reciprocal relationships on social media. Like, I really just don't think we can.
Agreed.
I mean, I think we can meet you know, I met you through Instagram,
Yeah.
you know, so we can meet people and we can form relationships that we can then carry off of social media. But even you and I, like, we have a reciprocal relationship. Like, you come on my podcast, I come on your podcast. You came and taught for my membership a few months ago. I'm going to teach for your membership in October. Like, so we do have this reciprocal relationship. I can't have that with the 30,000 people who follow me on social media, you know?
Right.
Like, so when someone comes in my DMs, and I get this literally every day, somebody's in the DMs and they're like, hey, I just want to ask you a quick question. And then they go into like their trauma story.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what do you think I should do? Or I'm having this physical symptom and this physical symptom and this physical symptom. And I'm thinking that I need to heal my nervous system, and everything you share resonates so much, but where do I start? Or, you know, it's just like stuff like that. And it's not as overwhelming for me now as it used to be, because I've learned how to not fawn for people and just be like, I can't offer coaching in the DMs. Like, I can't offer coaching in the DMs, period. And I just leave it at that. But, you know, I don't know how to explain to people that when you do that to a person, whether they're a coach or not, but whenever you just like show up and you're just like, bleh, here's my story, now tell me what to do. Even we do this to our friends too, is what is missing from that equation is consent.
Yes.
And if someone shows up in my DMs and they're like, here is my entire pain story, without asking me, is it okay with you if I share this first?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I don't love opening my DMs and the first thing I see is somebody's pain story. I don't love that. I would really prefer that they be like, hey, I have a painful story and I have questions about it. Is it okay if I share it with you? And that's, to me, that is where it goes from being a non-reciprocal. It's not reciprocal. It's more like transactional. Like, they're trying to get something out of me without giving anything back.
Yes.
And this is why I don't offer coaching in the DMs, because not only did that person not ask me for consent to share their pain story with me, but like, I also have not, we haven't established a way for there to be reciprocity in that relationship. And so if I answer their question and give them some coaching or some advice in the DMs or whatever, like, I've given to them, but then they haven't also given me something in return, you know? And it then becomes extractive and exploitive of me and of my knowledge and my skill set, which I love to share with people, but I don't love to share it in a way that's extractive. I love to share it in a way that nourishes me too. And it is not nourishing to me to open my DMs and read somebody's pain story with them asking for advice. And I know that if I could give them advice, I could give them great advice. Like I know I could. But if I do, then I am extracting from myself, knowing that I won't get any nourishment back other than maybe a like, oh, thanks, this helps so much, you know? Like, and that doesn't feel nourishing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear this a lot with my clients who are artists, where people will say, do it for the exposure. Like, can you just make up this quick little logo for me? Like, and, I'll make sure that I tag you on my social media and things like that. And it's like, no. Like, we need to have a system in place. Again, just to use your words, that's not extractive. And, for me, I'm being reminded of, I'm in the middle of a launch right now, at the time of this recording, and almost every day I get a question in my DMs or my emails about a scholarship for my program. My program is a very, very high touch container. There's group coaching, there's one-on-one coaching. And, to me, it initially used to feel almost insulting that people would ask for scholarship. For this container, I offer so much free content on the podcast. I offer so much free work on Instagram. I also offer scholarships for my my workshops, which are at a lower price point, and it doesn't require me to do any extra work to have somebody, an additional person, sit in my workshop versus sit in my program. And so I think, yes, I do, and then I've also been accused of being capitalistic because I don't offer scholarships for my programs. And to me, this is where that nuance of reciprocity needs to be a part of this conversation. Because between a client and a practitioner relationship, yes, the money that you are investing into the program feeds me, it nourishes me, it allows me to continue to do the work that I do, but also it's an energetic investment on your side saying, this is so important to me that I'm willing to sting a little bit from it, and when you invest in your work as a client in this way, and there's a little bit of a sting and there's a little bit of a like, ooh, that's uncomfortable, it is that first step in actually changing your it's like the first step in your transformation.
Yeah.
Is I've got a little bit of skin in the game.
Yeah.
And so if you're going out there and you're asking somebody for a scholarship for something that they are going to invest a lot into and you're going to put no investment into, like I know for sure, because I've done it before early on in my career, that client is not going to value that work as much as the client who has invested into that work.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've actually coached someone for free before, because I felt like they really needed it and I wanted to be generous, and I was really disappointed in how that person showed up.
Yeah.
Because they, they would come to the calls and they were fully present for the calls, but then I always give homework because one-on-one sessions are great and we can do great work in a one-on-one session, but the real work is what you're doing on your own. And it's how 100%. You're practicing in relationship, and it's how you're living in awareness and observing your own patterns. It's how you're feeling your own feelings. That's the work that has to happen out of a session. And then the sessions, obviously, like we can do parts work or somatic work or whatever during the session that's like practitioner guided or supported. But, you know, I don't want to have a codependent relationship with my clients. And so I give them ample time in between calls. They're still not unsupported in between calls. We have channels for support. So if something comes up or if they find themselves in a flashback or trigger or something, like they're not left high and dry until the next session. But I give homework because that observing and the practice and the integration and the nervous system hygiene and all of that is super, super important. Mm-hmm. And so the person that I coached for free, like they did very little, if any, of the homework that I gave. And I would assign the same homework multiple weeks in a row and they were still not doing it. And and I showed up in my fullness. Right? Like I gave them the same attention, skill, listening, co-regulation that I give clients who pay me more, mm-hmm. you know? So I showed up the same and this person didn't. And I learned a hard lesson. And like, I don't think that I would go back and be like, no, I wouldn't coach you for free. I'm glad I did it because I got the experience. And I was like, okay, like it's true. If someone doesn't have some skin in the game, then they're not as invested. And I don't necessarily have skin in the game of coaching someone because, you know, I don't ever promise anybody that we're going to start here and we're going to end up here in this time frame because it's just not like that. And I would, for anyone listening, I would caution you to notice that is a red flag in any coach or practitioner who promises certain results in X amount of time. Like that is a red flag for me. So I don't do that. But people who are unfamiliar with this work, are new to this work, they're so used to the marketing that promises X result in X amount of time. And so whenever they're like, well, I don't know if I got what I wanted out of this, you know, in a 12-week time period or whatever, that's not because I didn't show up and give it my all. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I think a lot of people want to make it the practitioner's fault because coaching is a results-based business. It's a service business that's based in results. That's how you measure success, air quotes. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it gets really tricky. And so for me, it's like the reciprocity piece of it isn't just you pay this amount of money because you're getting X result in X amount of time. Like that is extremely transactional and capitalistic, in my opinion. Yeah. It's more about I am investing this money because it nourishes you as a coach and I receive it as nourishment. I receive it with gratitude. This business is the only thing that pays my bills. We don't have something else. Mm-hmm. We don't have a trust fund. Our families don't have any money. Like we are supporting ourselves with this business. And so it nourishes me and I'm grateful for that. But then I am turning around and I am then nourishing the client and I'm nourishing them with co-regulation, with support, with my skill set, with my expertise, with my ability to hold that space. And I do that in a non-judgmental, very compassionate, very slow and gentle way. Mm-hmm. And so if they're not willing to, if they're just investing the money, but then they're not showing up for themselves, then to me, that still feels transactional. Mm. So the reciprocity isn't just in what they're paying me. It's also in the effort that they're putting in because I am also showing up with the effort and the skill and the time and the attention.
Yeah. I think a piece of that I want to just pull out and bring a little bit of more attention to is the pace. Because when you are comparing reciprocity and transactional relationships, and, you know, like it's just rot in my industry of business coaching. It's like get a 10K month in 6 weeks, like that kind of messaging. And when we put it's good to have goals. I'm not saying it's bad to have goals. But when we put a deadline on these are the results that you are meant to have, it does not allow for your nervous system to feel safe in that.
Completely.
How many of us have, obstacles around deadlines and showing up on time and things like that because we were held to such a strict standard when we were younger. And so if we're talking about reciprocity, it's reciprocity as a relationship to every aspect of your life. So, we just sort of unpacked the reciprocity between a client and a practitioner relationship. But for the client to have reciprocity with their own nervous system, there needs to be time. There needs to be patience. There needs to be an expansiveness that only comes when you are given the permission to sink into time. And so, that's why I think that for me personally, I, as a practitioner, invest in longer containers with my clients because it allows for their nervous system to actually feel safe and not go into this like scarcity place of like, oh my God, I need to hurry up and do this. And then we're doing it from a place of our sympathetic drive versus a fully integrated experience, which comes from the parasympathetic. And we can only do that when we have the permission to slow down.
This is exactly why I, just in the last 3 weeks, I was feeling super led by my body, by spirit, by whatever you want to call it, to discontinue doing 12-week coaching containers. And so because 12 weeks is it's a great time to start. And a lot of people, they like that it's like 12 weeks. It's not a huge time investment, but it's also not a tiny time investment. Like, it feels like a good way to dip your toe in the water and sort of get to know the coach and then establish that relationship and whatever. But I have about 60 to 70% of my 12-week clients returning and doing another 12 weeks and then another 12 weeks after that. And so I was like, I'm shortchanging people if I don't offer longer term containers for the exact reasons that you just mentioned, because somebody would get to like, in a 12-week container, someone would get to like week 9 and I would be like, this is our second to last coaching call. How are you feeling about that? And they would be like, oh my God. And immediately you can just see like they're holding their breath and they just got really tense. And then every single time for that next 3 weeks, if they weren't using Voxer for support before, they are on it every fucking day. They're asking me questions every day and they're like, I've got to get the most out of this. Oh my gosh, maybe I haven't shown up for myself for these last 9 weeks and I've got 3 weeks left. So I have to really like push and I have to make sure I ask all the questions and I have to, all these little details that we haven't gotten to, we have to tidy them up here because, oh my God, we only have 3 weeks left. And just saying that like that, I can feel like sympathetic activation in my body, like just saying that. So I realize like it's such a disservice to offer 12-week containers because then there's an expectation that X result is going to happen in X amount of time. Yeah. And there's this time scarcity, there's a sense of urgency, and I can get rid of those things by offering a longer container. It's the same reason, Kat, like you and I have talked about this off the podcast. It's the same reason why I publish my prices prominently on everything. Like when somebody wants to work with me with coaching, on my coaching page on my website, it has the price mentioned multiple times. When you click on the link that says click here to apply to work with me, it's at the top of the application. This is how much it costs. No scholarships are available. This is the payment plan option. And then they fill out the application, and the very bottom of the application, it says, again, this is how much this costs. Are you willing to make this investment? Do you understand? And they have to click yes before they can submit the application. So they know the price every single step of the way, and they still consent to filling out the application, knowing that what the price is, right? Knowing that I'm not going to offer scholarships. And so then by the time we're jumping on a discovery call, I'm not like working them up to be hopeful to work with me and then dropping a price on them that then shatters all of that, or that creates this, oh my God, I've got to come up with this money because if I don't work with her, I'll never be well. Like I refuse to participate in that kind of marketing. And so I'm very transparent about my prices. On every single offering I have, my prices are prominently displayed because the kind of people that I want working with me are the full body yes people. Not the like, oh my God, I'm going to activate my nervous system and potentially put my finances in jeopardy because if I don't work with you, I'm never going to get better. That is like urgency, scarcity, sympathetic activation. That's perpetuating the cycle they're already in. I'm not here to use my marketing to perpetuate people's nervous system dysregulation. And then if they are in a dysregulated state, when they make the decision to work with me, that's not starting the client coach relationship out on a good foot. Like, that's not how I want to start a relationship with someone. That's not reciprocal.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think you and I do it differently than most people do.
Well, I think for me, when I think about the word reciprocal, it's like baked into that word is this idea of like, we take care of each other.
Yeah.
And that care comes in a practitioner-client relationship from the moment that they step into your sphere, whether it's your social media or a podcast or a sales page. And I really appreciate, because you and I talked about this offline, and I did not used to post my prices. And I actually was advised by a very, very prominent nervous system coach. I took one of his workshops and had an opportunity to ask him this question, because it's a question that I've been sitting with for a long time. Do I post my prices or do I not post my prices? And his answer, which made sense for me at the time, was if the price is going to be an objection for the client and they are going to get dysregulated about it, then would you not want to be on that call with them and help them through that dysregulation? And that did make sense to me at the time, but it made sense to me like in this like very logical way. And I've had experiences where clients have come on a connection call. We've talked through it all. We get to the price, and like you're saying, it's this like sticker shock of like, oh my gosh. And I've had really beautiful opportunities to actually show them my coaching skills on that call, because it's like, let's unpack what that price means to you, and let's like get into what the dysregulation is about. And a lot of times when there's that shock of the price, it's it has deeper roots than just the money. It oftentimes goes to, I'm not allowed to take care of myself. I buy things for other people, for my family, and I can't do that for myself. I'm not allowed to be nourished. And so like there's a big story underneath that iceberg that I've had really, really amazing times on connection calls to work through that. Yeah. And, you know, when I brought it to you, friend to friend, like, what do you think about this? You shared with me and you assured me that actually you can still have those moments even when you publish your prices. And that was the little nudge that I needed to feel safe enough in my own nervous system, because I didn't want to say goodbye to those people, you know? Like, I think about those people, and like there's two people in particular that I'm thinking of right now, and it's like, oh my God, we've done amazing work. They are such beautiful humans, and I like cringe to think like, oh my gosh, if I hadn't had an opportunity to coach them on that call, then we would have never been able to work together, and, you know, like yada, 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 in my mind. Right. Yeah. And if I take my business practices and pillars down to what it is that I want to stand for, one of the core things is consent. And so, I think as soon as you said that to me, offline, I was like, you're right. This is a non-consensual thing that I am doing. And I'm doing it in the name of supporting this person's healing. But if I want someone to come into my space and feel safe, what that means is that I am not going to be another human, another part of our culture, another, cog in the collective that is pushing someone into a sympathetic state.
Yep.
And so my goal, if I look at all the different pieces of my work, is how can I make you feel safe in all the things that you do with me? And it has to be baked into every single step of the way in order for there to be a reciprocal relationship.
Yes.
Because to me, when we say I have reciprocal relationships with my clients, it's that I take care of you and you take care of me.
Yep.
And we do that in a very boundaried way, and that comes from safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it's like the moment that people don't feel safe is when we start going into extractive modalities.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So remind me, let's put a pin in the safety conversation because I want to come back to that. So don't let me forget to come back to the safety part. Because it has to do with reciprocity, social media. There's a lot I have to say about that. So we'll put a pin in that. But I want to circle back to what you said about how you can still have that coaching opportunity on a connection call, even if it's over finances, even when somebody knows the price going in. So last week I had this exact experience. So I had somebody hop on a connection call. She was initially she applied for 12 weeks of coaching. And I was transparent and I said, this is the last time I'm going to offer 12-week programs. So if that's what you want, I'm not trying to create urgency. I just need you to know this is the last time I'm going to offer it. I'm transitioning to longer containers and here's why. And so then she said, well, maybe I just need a longer container. Tell me more about working with you for 6 months or 12 months. Mm-hmm. So I did. And I haven't put pricing information for 6 months and 12 months on my website yet because this is literally a decision I've made like in the last 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so I told her everything that was involved. In addition to longer coaching containers of 6 or 12 months, I'm also moving from 60-minute sessions to 90-minute sessions. So clients are getting more time. And then instead of doing 2 sessions per month, I'm doing 3 sessions per month. So in a 6-month coaching container, a client is going to get 24 hours of FaceTime with me over 6 months. Plus, I give client support on Voxer in between our sessions, and they can, contact me on Voxer during my office hours. And they get about 30 minutes per week is what people average. And so I kind of try to cut it off at like 30 minutes per week of support there. So in a 6-month coaching container, that's another 12 hours of coaching. And so they're getting like 39 total hours or something like that, in a 6-month container because they're getting more frequent sessions and longer sessions. And then the 12 months is the 6-month program times 2. So just double everything. And so then I told her the price of the 6-month and the 12-month program. And she was like, it really sounds like I would benefit more from 6 months, but I'm just getting hung up on the prices because I'm not bringing in money right now. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I totally understand. There's absolutely no pressure for you to make it. Like I tell people that repeatedly on calls, there's no pressure. There's no pressure. I want you to make a decision that feels like a yes in your body. And she was just like, okay, well, I don't know. I just have all this fear about money. And so I just asked her, if fear wasn't present, what would you choose? And she immediately, without thinking, said 6 months. I would do 6 months. And I was like, okay, why? Why would you choose that if fear wasn't present? And she said, well, it just feels so much more spacious. It feels like there's more time and I don't have to rush to try to cram it all into 12 weeks. And I get more support from you and I get longer sessions and it gives me time to like integrate more and establish better habits and all of that. And I was like, okay, so let's work out a payment plan arrangement together so that you can have what feels spacious for you and I'm still getting the support that I need. And so that made all the difference in the world. And the difference there was that spaciousness, right? And that's what's not present when we're in that sympathetic nervous system activation, because there's urgency, there's scarcity. It feels like we're squished, right? Like we can't take a breath. And whenever you expand, suddenly there's more space around everything.
Yeah.
And it feels doable. It feels easier, right? I think too, God, we could do a whole nother podcast episode about this. I think too, there's this myth that to do this work, it has to be fucking hard. And that's not true.
Yeah.
That's just the story we tell ourselves is, oh my God, I'm doing trauma healing work. It has to be hard. Like, it doesn't. You can actually do trauma healing work with ease. Right? Where it becomes hard and sticky is when we start resisting. And we're usually resisting when we feel constriction. And so how do we take the constriction out of it? Well, we figure out a way to create more expansion and more spaciousness, right? Like so I got that moment too of being able to coach someone on a call where they already knew the prices, but they were still feeling that, but that was because of fear. And so making a decision that's not based in fear, but that's based in what feels the most expansive. And then here's the decision I've made. This is what feels expansive and spacious for me. Now let's figure out how to make that work for both of us.
Right.
That is reciprocal.
Right. And like, to me, like, when you are asking these questions, and again, this is why we have to do our own work. You know, I think that mentoring about sales calls is actually some of the hardest work that I've done with people, because, you know, it's not this like polished thing. It's like other business coaches will sell you on like a sales script that you have to, you know, abide by. And, you know, I've actually had my last business coach. One of the reasons why I started business coaching is because I had such a difficult experience with this one. She said, you know, at all costs, try to get a yes at the end of the sales call. And to me, it's like, okay, like, let's just push on that scarcity wound right there, you know? So to me, the level of regulation that somebody shows up on a sales call to is directly related to how much personal work they've done on themselves.
100%.
Because it is so easy to show up on a sales call and make it about you as a practitioner. Whether the person is saying yes or whether the person is saying no is directly related to your value, for example. Or if you have your own hangups about money, whether they say yes or no to you, it triggers all sorts of stuff about money for you. Or if somebody is, you know, picking out particular parts of your program and asking you to clarify or questioning why is that in there, or can I do it differently? Or, you know, like, if you don't have the integrity and the confidence in your program or in your container, then that can trigger all sorts of things for you. And so to me, yes, you know, we all can show up in session, but that's almost like the easier part of our work. The sales call has so much skill, nuance, self-regulation, co-regulation. Like, there's so much stuff that's happening on that 30-minute, 45-minute call that I love coaching people on that, because it's such an opportunity to see where all of your triggers and where all of your hidden things are coming out to play. And so, as soon as I started doing the depth of work that I've been doing now for the last 3-4 years, my sales call, like, close rate went from probably 40 or 50%, which is actually pretty high in our industry, to now it's about 90%. And it has nothing to do with, I mean, I personally don't think it doesn't have anything to do with like the quality of my product or any of that. To me, it's like when somebody feels safe on a sales call with me, then they can start seeing like, oh, if I can feel safe on a sales call with Kat, then I wonder what kind of transformations are going to come after this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I love teaching, is that nervous system regulation is not just important for you as a practitioner showing up in sessions for clients, but it's you as a business owner showing up on sales calls for clients too.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. That's great.
Do you want to go back
this
to that?
This is why you have a great... Oh, right. Yeah. This is why you have a successful business coaching business, because of what you just said. So I have nothing to add. Yeah. So the safety thing, talking about social media specifically, is that we were talking about how, like, I don't have a reciprocal relationship with all the people that follow me on social media, and it would be impossible for me to have that. Just like it's impossible for you to have that. And one of the things that I've noticed, especially since 2020 with all the like social justice woke bullshit, is people showing up in victimhood on social media. And when they come across content that triggers them, doesn't resonate, doesn't line up with their belief system, whatever, is that they say that like it's harmful and it's not safe. And like, how dare you as a trauma coach and as someone who claims to be an expert in the nervous system say these things that are harmful and that aren't safe. And I thought about that a lot. And, you know, I mean, I'm like, well, oh my gosh, am I like, is what I'm saying really unsafe? Like, what is the role of safety in social media? Like, it gave me a chance to really think about that. And the most grounded feeling that I got in my body was that if I'm not in a reciprocal relationship with someone, it is not my job to create safety in that relationship. And so it is not my job to make 30,000 people who follow me on Instagram feel safe. That's not, like, I can't do that. That's unrealistic. Unless I'm just censoring myself all the time, which I refuse to do. So my job, if I'm in relationship with somebody, and Instagram isn't a relationship. So if I'm in relationships with somebody, my responsibility to create safety is in relationships that are established and that we have consent. Like, that's where it is my responsibility to create safety. So that means in my home with my family, it's my responsibility to create safety there. In my real life community, that's my responsibility to create safety. With my membership, it's my responsibility to create safety. With my clients, that's a container where it is my responsibility to create safety. And with my students in my group program, that's actually where I'm responsible for creating safety, because every single one of those relationships has been entered into consensually, and there's reciprocity.
Yeah.
With the 30,000 strangers that follow me on the internet, I am not obligated to create safety for them, because we are not in a consensual reciprocal relationship. They are showing up, they are consuming what I put out there. And most people are great and they love what I say. And then there's that handful of people that they always feel like it's their job to point out where I'm wrong or point out where I'm using harmful, air quotes, language or whatever. And I just accepted that, because I'm like, you know what? You and I are not in a relationship. We do not have an established container of a relationship. And therefore it is not my responsibility to create safety for you here. So that's what I wanted to circle back around to.
Yeah. I think I want to add on to that to say that even if you were somebody whose objective was to create safety for the 30,000 people who follow you, that's an impossible task.
Totally.
Because you don't know what is going to trigger one person versus another person. Like, I hate bananas. If you posted about how much you love bananas, it might be triggering for me. And so, like...
I hate bananas too, Kat. I hate them. I hate the way they smell. I don't like them.
Yes! So, like it's just an impossible task.
Yep.
And I also think that you're selling yourself a little bit short here in that you aren't creating safety for people, because I think that what you're doing is actually you're inviting people to create safety for themselves.
100%. Yeah.
And so, like, there are going to be some people who take that and receive it and, like, are going to be willing to look at their triggers and be like, oh, I wonder why that feels so triggering for me, and why Lindsay's content is bringing up these feelings of dysregulation, and I wonder if I can, work through that, versus somebody who's, like, feeling that dysregulation and immediately goes to a fight response with you.
Yeah, it's my fault.
Yeah.
It's my fault that they're feeling dysregulated.
Right. So I think that at least this is what I get when I consume your content, because we don't always see eye to eye, you and I. And I love that about our friendship, is that, like, even though we don't see eye to eye 100% of the time, we are always seeking to understand each other. And so when you post something that feels a little bit dysregulating to my nervous system, it's then an invitation that I take on myself to then work through those feelings and be like, oh, I wonder why she would post something like that. And if it's something that I can't quite figure out on my own, I know that, you wouldn't be opposed to me jumping in and sending you a message and being like, hey, Lindsay, like, I need to understand this a little bit differently from your perspective. Can you please explain, like, why you would say something like this?
Yeah.
And that's a very, very different energy from pointing fingers and, policing you and censoring you and trying to get you to conform to a level of safety that is, and I say safety in air quotes, get you to a place where it's safe to a particular subset of the population.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. I love what you said. And that is what you just described, and how you would respond to my content that maybe you don't understand or that doesn't hit right on the first try, is exactly what I wish everyone who follows me would do. And I think the majority of people do. But what I'm hearing you say is like, I'm not going to just read what you say, and if it triggers me or it sits wrong or whatever, I'm immediately going to, like, tell you how harmful your content is. Mm-hmm. You're like, I'm going to sit with it first. Mm-hmm. I'm going to feel what's there, because clearly you're having a response, right? So, like, that has nothing to do with me. It's just whatever my content has mirrored in you, right? And it's holding up a mirror to you and going, hey, there's something here. You want to think about it? You want to feel it, right? Like, and so that's a level of personal responsibility. And then you're like, if I still sit with it and I still don't get it, then I'm going to reach out privately and I'm going to ask. And that, I mean, unfortunately, most people aren't doing that. And I'm just hearing such a beautiful level of personal responsibility, and personal responsibility is necessary in reciprocal relationships.
Yeah.
It's not like a codependent relationship where one person is constantly trying to make the other person feel one way or act one way, or they're modifying themselves to avoid conflict and please the other person or whatever. Like, it's not like that. It's two autonomous, sovereign people in a consensual relationship saying, hey, you said this thing, and here's how I notice I'm feeling about it. Can you help me understand your perspective more?
Right.
Like, that's not confrontational at all.
Right.
That's not going to be a dysregulating conversation. That's going to be a regulating conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so many people are not in that space, and they're so used to just like, I'm triggered and then boom, I have to throw it back on you. Like, it's like a game of hot potato, right? Yeah. It's like, my pain is too hot for me to hold, and so I have to throw it at someone else.
Yeah.
And maybe they can hold it because I can't.
Yeah.
And this is why nervous system regulation is so important, because when your nervous system is regulated, it has more resiliency, it has more flexibility, and you can hold a hotter potato for longer without throwing it on someone. So And I just think that like the earth itself, like zoom out from social media, but like the earth itself would be so completely different if we had a reciprocal relationship with the earth. Mm-hmm. Right. And if like, when we have our pain points triggered, sometimes our reaction is to like, on a collective scale, I'm saying not as an individual, but on a collective scale, it's like, when one country's collective nervous system feels dysregulated, often their response is to like go to war against another country and their collective nervous system. So that's creating more dysregulation. Or when a corporation perceives like, oh my God, we're running out of resources, then their reaction to that isn't to get creative and think of new ways so that we don't need as much of that resource that we're extracting from the earth. Yeah. Like, let's figure out a different way to do that. It's like, oh my God, we have to go extract more resources from the earth, And so it's, as is the micro, as is the macro, like this is happening on a face-to-face individual level, this lack of reciprocity and the dysregulation and the extraction that it's creating, but it's also happening on a massive, grand, collective earth scale. Yeah. And I think that our earth would not be in the situation that it's in today in terms of climate change and depletion of resources and all of that if we had had a reciprocal relationship with the earth from the beginning of the industrial age, we wouldn't be in this situation. And reciprocity, it just means so much to me lately. Even to my content this week, I did a podcast about how we can help to regulate our nervous systems by cleaning up our space, by just like living in a space that's like clean and tidy and surrounding ourselves with beauty, and how we deserve that and we need that. And I was sharing with you before you hit record that I've even started to see that I have a reciprocal relationship with my house. Mm-hmm. And like, my house is this amazing container and it holds me and it protects me. And it's my favorite place on earth to be, is at my home. And so it's nourishing me in that way. And I have a reciprocal relationship with my house because I take care of it. Mm-hmm. And I do maintenance on it, I make it beautiful. I'm trying to leave it more beautiful than it was when I got here. Mm-hmm. And like, because of that, I just believe that the energy between my house and me is like, it's clean energy. You know what I mean? Like, it's clean. It's not messy. Same way with my land. I live on 6 acres in the woods, and I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to learn from people here who've studied with Indigenous people about stewarding land and about having a reciprocal relationship with land. And so don't take something from the land unless you're giving something back. And it's not like an eye for an eye kind of thing. It's more like, it's the spirit of it. And so there's a little grove of cedar trees on my property. And it's the only cedar trees on my whole property are in this one little stand, and they're in a circle. And the first time I found this grove of cedar trees, like I immediately felt like there was a grandmother cedar, a mother cedar, and then sisters. Like it was like this grove of like feminine cedar trees. And the mother tree was the biggest one, and she has this big branch that kind of reaches out, and like you have to either go under or kind of push it to the side to get into the grove. And when I first came across it, like I immediately had this sense of like, I have to ask before I can come into this space. Because like, I can't get into this space without either pushing this branch out of the way or like going under it or around it or something like that. And I just felt like I needed to ask. And I did. And I felt like the trees said yes. And so I went into the space, and it has become a space where I love to have ceremonies, and I've done grieving ceremonies there. I've done ancestor ceremonies there. And just for me being in the space, I leave an offering when I leave. And so one time, like I had cut my hair and I saved my hair and I left that. Another time I left like some flowers that I had picked. Another time I was on my period and I was using a period cup at the time. I don't use a cup anymore, but I emptied my cup out and I poured my menstrual blood on the ground. Like, And I believe that whenever I do that, like I'm honoring that space that has held me, and I'm leaving something behind to nourish it in the same way that it's nourished me. And I just feel like that keeps those entities, those beings, those spirits, whatever they are, like I just feel like it keeps them happy. And it keeps me happy. And so it's a reciprocal relationship in that way. Reciprocity is not just about I do this, so you do this. Or I provide this service and you pay this much money. You know, like that's more transactional. And that's a very like 2D thing, I think, is this like transaction. And I'm not here for transactional relationships. I want reciprocal relationships. Transactional relationship is an eye for an eye. It's we're keeping score. And if there's 1 point on your side, then that means there needs to be 1 point on my side. That's transactional. That's not nourishing. And reciprocity is nourishing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another component of reciprocity that you've given us so many beautiful examples of there is personal responsibility. Because as soon as you start taking personal responsibility, you pull yourself out of the victim bully cycle.
Yeah.
And, you know, I see this so much of the extractive sort of energy, this like, I need more, I want more, comes from folks who identify as victims or martyrs. And when you come into a space with this feeling of victimhood or martyrdom, it's like you need the external world to change for you in order for you to feel good and safe. And rather, if you were to take that personal responsibility and, you know, going back to your example of the social media post of like, instead of me reading something that you and I don't agree on, and, you know, if I were to be like fully offended and like, you don't realize that like I'm a victim of X, Y, and Z and you aren't understanding my story, you know, that would be going to you with the kind of energy that it would be extractive actually. Because what I'm wanting from you would be for you to change your mind, for you to tell me something that is, you know, going to make me feel better, for you to shift what your perspective is. And so when we go into these spaces without personal responsibility and self-regulation, then, you know, as you were saying, as is micro, as is macro, we feel like we are entitled to exploit from the earth because I feel victimized, because this is the only way this is going to make me feel good. And so, you know, I think that even in this beautiful relationship that you have with your house, you know, how many people have you had conversations with who are like, oh, I have to clean my house. Yeah. It's like you're a victim to this actually beautiful structure that houses you and takes care of you. Bless you.
Thank you. I muted myself thinking, oh, I'll do that. It won't go through. Yeah. And that's, you know, what's interesting is like in the post I've been sharing this week to promote this podcast episode, I've done some reels and I've done some posts about it. And inevitably, when you do a kind of post that's like calling someone to some kind of action, you know, like tidy up your space. Like it's calling someone to action. It's saying, it's like literally this is an easy and free way that you can take some burden off of your nervous system, because our nervous systems have to respond to both internal and external stressors and stimuli. So if the energy of trauma is like mind-body-soul-ancestor clutter, like that's what the energy of trauma is, right? It's like very messy, cluttered.
Love that.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. It's mind-body-soul-ancestor clutter is trauma.
Yeah.
So then, of course, if that's the internal stressor that our bodies, our nervous systems are responding to, then the external clutter, literal external clutter, is also a stressor that our nervous systems have to respond to. And they're trying, like our nervous systems get stressed out, I feel like, whenever our environments are like crazy and cluttered and messy, because our nervous systems are seeking safety, and it's very hard to feel safe in chaos.
Yeah.
right? Like we don't feel safe in chaos.
Yeah.
And so it's a reclamation of what we didn't have as children. If we grew up in chaotic, dysfunctional homes, it's a reclamation to create a container for ourselves now that is regulating, that feels good, that feels like it nourishes us. It's an investment in ourselves and it's an investment into our space. It's a win-win. Like it's literally a win-win.
Yeah.
But I think that we have so much victimhood in our culture and it's just like, oh my God, I just can't do that. And you're so privileged because you have time to do that. And you know, and I just hear all these victim stories and it's like, I've literally given you a suggestion for a free way that you can take care of your nervous system. And the only way you're responding is to tell me all the reasons why you can't.
Right. Right.
Like personal fucking responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just sharing with you how much that content has been resonating for me just in the time of my life. I am living on the road with my partner. We live out of a 14-foot trailer. And so there's been a lot of letting go in the last couple of months. Like literally selling or donating 90% of our belongings before we moved.
Yeah.
And as I was sitting here listening to you, I'm reminded of the energy of the metal element. And the organs associated with the metal element are the lungs and the large intestine. And it's like people don't realize that those two organs are linked in the body, because it's like if you are constipated, then your intestines move up into your diaphragm and you literally, it's harder to take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you are able to have a digestive system that is moving and letting go of things on a regular basis, then your lungs have actual literal space to breathe. And so, you know, thinking of this as like an energetic release, like all the clutter, all the things, like I had no idea we had accumulated so much stuff together. It literally, we lived in a condo in Las Vegas for a year before we hit the road. It was like, how much stuff did we accumulate in a year together, you know? And so like releasing and letting go of all that clutter has allowed for inspiration to happen. You know, we get to breathe a little bit easier. And, you know, because we live in such a small space now, that every single thing that comes into our space now is very intentional and now is very like, okay, do we have literal space for this? And is this important enough to, you know, like space is a commodity in this container. Yeah. And so it's a mindset and a framework that I don't want to release, even when we do buy land, build a house, like all the things where our space is going to literally increase. But like, I want to keep my fingers on this feeling of, you know, not just bringing things in without thinking about it. And, you know, and for me, that's another way that we can stop being so extractive with the world, because it's like, how many fucking t-shirts do I need, really? You know, how many, you know, just how many things do I need, essentially, when really my life functions even better now, because I don't have to like root through an entire closet of clothes to get to the one shirt that I'm thinking of. Like my life is so much more efficient now because I've been able to let go of that clutter and let go of that space. And it's like, I don't know if you've read Marie Kondo's book, but like that was one of the things that we did together before we moved, because one of the practices that she invites you to do is to hold everything that you own and ask if it brings you joy. And it was like, literally everything in here brings us joy. So like build your spaces in this way. And again, like, I think it goes back to reciprocity, because it's like, okay, now I really take care of this space because this is our home. It's an easier space to take care of than like a 2-bedroom condo, but
yeah. I love what you said about how in your 14-foot trailer, that space is a commodity. And I think people who are listening to this might be like, well, yeah, of course, if I was in a 14-foot trailer, space would be a commodity for me too. Space is a commodity no matter how big your house is.
Yeah.
Like it is. And again, going back to extracting from the earth, if people weren't always wanting more space, more land, more money, more stuff, more infrastructure, like more. I mean, again, if we treated the space of the earth like the commodity and the resource that it is, instead of extracting from it, again, our planet would be in a completely different place right now.
Absolutely.
And so like I talk about this a lot in my client work, is that there is a difference between intellectual understanding and embodied understanding. And like, I can explain to you in intellectual terms all day long about the nervous system and regulating the nervous system and the polyvagal theory and the states of the nervous system and trauma responses. I mean, I can give you all the intellectual information about that you want. But until you like feel what it feels like to be regulated in your body, then you only have intellectual understanding.
Yes.
The minute it switches from intellectual understanding to embodied understanding, meaning I can live this in my body. I can explain it without even thinking about it because I have lived it so intentionally, and it has just become a part of who I am, and it is not separate from me. Like me and this experience are the same thing because I am embodying regulation in my nervous system. Mm-hmm. Like you are embodying the understanding that space is a commodity. Most people are not embodying that. And so for them, space is something that there's never enough of. And so they're always needing more. People are the same way with money, right? It's like, it's a resource that I always want more of, but are you ever happy with just more money? Like, sure, more money can make life easier in a lot of ways. But people who are just constantly extracting to get more and more, they're never filling that hollowness that's inside of them. Yeah. And they're never living reciprocally. And so like you're embodying this understanding of space and of reciprocity in a really beautiful way. And I mean, I live in a 2,200 square foot house, so I have quite a bit more space than you have, but I also have this understanding of reciprocity with my home. And so I don't care if my home is 100 square feet or 10,000 square feet. I never plan on living in a 10,000 square foot home, but if it was, like, I still want to take care of it and nourish it in the same way that it nourishes me. And as long as it's doing that and I'm doing that, then we have this reciprocal relationship and it's not extractive.
Yeah.
Have you ever read the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn?
I think you've suggested that to me before.
Okay,
I don't think I've
maybe I
picked it up
have.
yet.
I want to suggest it to everyone listening. So the book it's extremely creatively written. But the whole premise of the book is it's like telling a history of the world from the perspective of people being leavers or takers. Mm. And it's like, it's so beautiful. It's very anti-capitalistic. It's very like, it's reciprocal. It's reciprocal. It's about not taking from the earth without leaving something behind. But whenever people are just taking and never leaving, then we've extracted and we've exploited the resources of the planet. We do the same thing in relationship. If you're a person in relationship and you're always like fawn types do this in relationship, they're always giving, right? They're always the one sacrificing their needs or their desires for the other person. They're always the one who's taking care of the other person emotionally. Like they're changing and modifying themselves to get an outcome out of a situation or to influence the other person's emotions or whatever. So like they're always giving, and the other person is always taking. And the sensations that you and I have described in our bodies, and for you, it's like a hollowness in your chest. And for me, it's like this sense on the outside of my skin that's particularly concentrated, like in my armpits and kind of like going back on the backside of my rib cage. It's a very strange sensation. But if that's the feeling that I'm getting in my body because somebody's always taking from me, like, I am never going to feel nourished in that relationship. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how much I change and modify myself to please them. If they're a taker, they're a taker. And I mean, over giving is an unhealthy fawn response. Yes. You know, right? Over giving to someone is an unhealthy fawn response. It's unfortunate that our culture praises over giving and fawning. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Our culture praises non-reciprocal relationships.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that when I think about reciprocal relationships and how I want to model my life and how only allowing reciprocal relationships, whether it's with my patient clients or with my, friendships or relationships with my family, what I've found is this preciousness that gets distilled down. It's sort of like when we were talking about space, like when commodity is perceived of, or when space is perceived of as a commodity, like the space becomes so much more precious. And when you start honoring, if you're a fawner, if you start honoring your giving energy and you see that as a finite resource, you start seeing that it's actually precious for you to be with somebody and give of your energy. Yeah. And, if you're a bit of a taker and you sit in someone else's energy and, sort of like you were talking about with the cedar trees so beautifully. And as human beings, we have had a relationship of taking from our plant friends. And if you can sit in think about the personal responsibility that you can take in that relationship with the cedar trees, then you start realizing the preciousness of their giving energy. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's ultimately what I think has come from living a life where I am seeking reciprocity, is it gets distilled down to this really, really beautiful energy of preciousness and sacredness.
Yeah. I agree completely. That's beautiful. I don't think we could end it any better. Yeah.
Well, my dear, thank you. Speaking of reciprocity, I honor you and I really appreciate the time that you've spent with me this afternoon. I always love hanging out with you.
Me too. Thank you, Kat.
And I love the way that your brain, your body, your soul works. So I'm so happy to share you with my people. And I would love for you to drop in and share how people can find you.
Okay. So on Instagram, I am Lindsay Lockett. And Lindsay is with an EY, not an AY. My website is lindsaylockett.com. My podcast is Holistic Trauma Healing. You can listen to it anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. I offer a Nervous System 101 workshop. It's a low cost workshop. We offer scholarships for that as well. Like you were saying with your workshops, I was like nodding my head up and down the whole time because I was like, wow, we do some really similar things. So we do offer scholarships for that. I usually teach it about every 6 weeks. So depending on when this episode goes out, I may be about to teach it again or have just taught it, but people can always join the wait list for that. And there's a link for that in my bio on Instagram. I also do a nervous system hygiene group coaching program, which is one of my most favorite things that I do in my work. And that opens up after every Nervous System 101 workshop. And then, I do one-on-one coaching, and I'm right now in the moment transitioning from 12-week containers to a minimum of 6 months, because I want to create more spaciousness for my clients and myself. So I think that's it.
Awesome. And
Yeah, thank you.
if anybody asks me about trauma healing, I will continue to send them to you because you're my gal.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. This was
Thank
so
you.
fun. I love talking to you.
Yeah. Alrighty. I'll see you next time, love.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.